The suffering of neurodivergent people, termed ADHD, is something that can't be understated. You have no idea what it would be like to have objectivity in a world of repeated horrors like war, bullying, hierarchical thinkers that will devalue and degrade you because they don't understand a mind that automatically learns, grows, and understands simply by the observation of reality. How could a psychology explain me in third grade when I could open a box and it's a remote control car with all the electronics, gears, and things, and without anybody there, I could put it together and then be driving it? I could understand the internal combustion engine already in third grade. And then I was termed to be learning disabled because I couldn't be homogenized. What they didn't understand, and I didn't understand, is that when the teacher talks, everything that I hear invokes a visualization. And so my thinking was visual and experiential, expansive. How did I learn about cars? Was I taught myself. And so people would be like, well, you had a dad that taught you. You know what my dad taught me was he taught me how the internal combustion engine in a car worked. I might have been 5. And he showed me a piston as his hand. His arm was a connecting rod. And he explained the crankshaft like the pedals on my bicycle. And so I formed a visual representation that became the seed of all my knowledge today. And so, I didn't know this was abnormal. And, this idea of ground up thinking, and when you talk about neurodivergent children having this heightened sense of justice as a pathology. See, empathy is not projecting yourself into someone else and saying, let me put myself in their shoes. No. You see, your fixation on your own emotional experience is your compass in reality, and you're avoiding the same triggers and you're running around in a circle. Normal human beings, to me, look very much like animals that have rabies. And when I go outside and I look at the patterns, I look at people sitting in traffic, I look at this mundane existence of sleepwalking people fueled by anxiety and fantasizing about a someday future as the only exit to their suffering. And human minds get attached to the attainment of their fantasy future. For some people, it's heaven, and it requires a crusade to eradicate people that disagree with your nonsensical, narcissistic, and sociopathic father figure, where Jesus said explicitly, when he conquered Satan, aka the serpent of the ego within his mind, and was reborn, he became the beingness of consciousness itself. The Son of God was the way of being that I took on as making a difference. That's the new organizing principle of my mind. And when God emerged in Jesus, the voice of his mind said, wow, look at all this power. Stand on top of the church and prove yourself. And he said, no. I'm going to ride a donkey. I'm going to show the world kindness and compassion. I'm going to show them the truth, the life, and the way. I'm going to show them the kingdom of God, a realm of limitless consciousness where each breath is a blessing, where turning water to wine means that I don't need Dom Perignon to celebrate my existence, and where the people that you persecute are my people. That getting the rich man to the kingdom of God is getting a camel through the eye of the needle because of the profound afflicted attachment to the material that becomes the embodiment of me, the symbolic attainment of the antithesis of your own fear of failure becomes success. Success to you is like an animal running from another animal and then hiding successfully. Success merely hides your fear of failure. Love merely hides your fear of being alone and forces your codependent attachment to somebody else that you've fantasized as the cure. And you put them into your fantasy future, and you fantasize about the future where you need to perfect yourself. And why do you do that? To remove the triggers, because you can't even use your mind. Your mind is so afflicted by fear that it is useless for the navigation of reality. Only in the avoidance of fear is your mind organized. And so when you think about tomorrow, it looks like yesterday. And so since you can't be perfect today or tomorrow, you have to invent a someday. And when the someday fails and you feel betrayed and heartbroken, you ruminate for 10 months and have to rebuild your ego and start believing in yourself and feel like you're good enough again, to go back out into the same vicious circle of figuring out how to be perfect, how to fake it till you make it, so you could obtain everything you need to prove yourself to everyone else, because you project your own not good enough onto the facial expressions, the tones of voices, the imaginary thoughts that you project into other people. And then you are in the nosebleed seats, looking at people with self-expression and power, and then wanting to falsely attribute traits to them, to objectify them, to mitigate the fact that you're just afraid, that you're not developing your self-expression. Self-expression isn't trauma dumping, because there's so many layers of inauthentic nonsense, because you fight yourself by creating subjective interpretations of idealized versions of yourself in a dissociative state of understanding, to put the nail in the coffin of your past as you bury the past to avoid reliving it, because your fight or flight reactions exist in your imagination. And so when you look at the future, you trigger yourself. You stop the formation of positive ideas so that you could avoid disappointment and failure. And you negotiate a comfort zone, a happy medium between your validation seeking and your avoidance of failure and disappointment and abandonment. And so your abandonment fear sticks you in your dead-end job so you don't get fired and do just the bare minimum to get by. And you do that in relationships. That love is just the codependent attachment to the temporary dopamine high of turning off aloneness and misunderstood. And it puts you on cloud nine and you think that's your real self. But then when you collapse because this fantasy future falls apart, you have to do it all over again. And so you live in two principal vicious circles. Figure out how to be perfect, and perfect is always in the future, because you're never perfect now. You can never obtain perfect, so you're never good enough. And so you hide your imperfection, or you want to share it with somebody to reduce the threshold of what good enough looks like for them and accept their traumas as their excuse so you could heal and fix each other. And then it doesn't work. And you need a referee, a people pleaser with a PhD that's an expert at what's wrong with everybody. Because what's wrong with you is big business. Because Western psychology has simply differentiated all the different presentations of ego into different diagnoses, and then you objectify yourself by taking on the personification of a diagnosis as simply an excuse to propagate the avoidance of the accumulated shame and guilt that comes along with being a self-sabotaging, fear-based reactionary ego. And so you project, I'm not good enough onto other people, and then react to them and become victimized as if other people made you not good enough, when it's your own reaction. Where truly life is empty and meaningless outside of this, and we'll build skyscrapers and nuclear weapons and destroy ourselves, because the Tower of Babel is a powerful metaphor for the organizing principles of fear. Through the attainment of materialism, you try to fix and change yourself. And so you need money, clothing, cars, status. You'll complain about energy while driving a 7,000-pound car that burns 99% of its fuel on itself and has planned obsolescence, so that you buy another one and another one and another one. And the banks have exploited your own narcissism by funneling your retirement funds to inflate an economy so Wells Fargo could have $1 trillion of money under management, which is just your money given back to you to inflate an economy to cash out billionaires. And the hierarchy of ignorance has sadistic, malignant narcissists leading the victim movements of covert cowards that need to project their sadism as the only way to explain their own ineptitude, fear, incompetence, and inferiority to all the people that they think make them feel this way. And it's the smarter people that they're very upset about. And so they like 1 × 1 = 2. And the earth is flat. And NASA is brainwashed. And so that's the world I get to live in. Where the Tower of Babel is getting ready to fall and the victims are just pointing at one another.